What's going on YouTube? It's your boy RonnyPugs back again with another Sam Raimi related Spider-Man video. And if you're like me, you've seen these movies probably 100 times, and even though I find all three movies enjoyable, there still are a lot of questions that were never answered throughout the films. So today I figured we could look at 5 of the unanswered questions throughout Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films. These will be in no order, but simply 5 unanswered questions throughout the films that I found important enough to include in this video. And before we begin, I am planning on doing either a part 2 to this video or a video on the 5 unanswered questions from the TASM films, so make sure to subscribe if you'd be interested in that sort of thing. And with that, we begin the video with the top 5 unanswered questions from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Beginning with the first unanswered question from Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, why didn't Harry let Peter move in with him after the death of Norman Osborn? Now this is one that kind of bothers me because we see the two living together in Spider-Man 1, but once Spider-Man 2 rolls around, Harry lives in the Osborn mansion all by himself and leaves Peter out to dry in probably the cheapest apartment in New York. The only answers I can get with this question is that Peter really wanted to make it on his own steam after Spider-Man 1, or maybe he didn't want to move in with Harry because of the PTSD that came from realizing that Norman Osborn was the Green Goblin. However, I think a more interesting plot point that could have been added to Spider-Man 2 was Harry kicking Peter out of the mansion because of his loyalty to Spider-Man. I would have included a scene like that after the party where Harry and Peter have an altercation. I think that would have added more to Peter giving up on being Spider-Man since absolutely nothing good was going for him at the time, but even so, I do wish we would have seen why Peter decided to live by himself opposed to with Harry. Speaking of Osborn, the next unanswered question from the Raimi trilogy is, whatever happened to Oscorp post Spider-Man 2? This is another interesting one because we know from Spider-Man 2 that Harry took over special projects at Oscorp after his father's passing, but once Spider-Man 3 rolls around, we don't get an update to what's going on at Oscorp, especially after Harry's accident during the beginning of the film. There's also never before seen Goblin technology in Spider-Man 3, so you think we'd get an update to what's going on and where that technology came from, but regardless, I wish we would have gotten some update to what happened to Oscorp after Spider-Man 2. There is a deleted scene from Spider-Man 3 where Peter visits Oscorp, to which I don't know the exact details of the scene, but maybe our question would have been answered during that scene. And on the topic of Spider-Man 3, whatever happened to Sandman after the finale of the film? This one's odd because we obviously didn't see this question answered because there was no follow-up to Spider-Man 3, but after the events of Spider-Man 3, the only other person currently with superpowers drifts off into the air never to be seen or heard from again, at least from our point of view. We never get a conclusion to what Sandman's going to do after the final battle, and more importantly, the fate of his daughter. For all we know, Sandman could have moved cities and continued robbing banks in order to get money for his daughter, so overall, I wish we would have either gotten a better ending to Sandman's story in Spider-Man 3, or something like we saw at the end of the Spider-Man 3 game. For the last 2 questions I've included in this video, we will be sticking with the theme of Spider-Man 3, with the first of the 2 remaining unanswered questions being, where was John Jameson during the events of Spider-Man 3? The thing that always bugged me about how the symbiote reaches Earth in Spider-Man 3 is that Spider-Man 2 perfectly set up a live-action 90s symbiote origin with introducing John Jameson to the franchise. But instead we got the luckiest crash landing in history with the symbiote landing right next to the only person with superpowers. Now the easy answer to this question is that John could have been on a mission or not even in New York at the time of Spider-Man 3, but it just doesn't make sense to not include the character in Spider-Man 3 when the 90s origin provided the best classic symbiote introduction without the help of other superheroes. However, I have heard there's a deleted scene in Spider-Man 3 where John Jameson was supposed to give a speech about the symbiote landing in Central Park, which I believe is in one of the behind the scenes books for the film. And although we don't know when that scene was supposed to take place, it's more than likely it was supposed to be a part of the breakup scene, and I do wish we would have gotten some closure to what happened to John Jameson post Spider-Man 2. Finally, the last unanswered question from the Raimi trilogy, and one that could have tied into the origin of 2 potential villains depending on the path the franchise took, whatever happened to the symbiote sample in Dr. Connor's office? This is a big one since it could have possibly played into the origin of Carnage depending on if Dr. Connor sends the symbiote elsewhere or tries to dispose of it. Maybe that symbiote sample could have expanded and given birth. And my personal idea to how the symbiote sample could have played into another villain involves Dr. Connor somehow using it within the lizard formula and basically making Peter responsible for the creation of the lizard, sort of like the TASM film. Another thing that could have happened with this symbiote sample involves Dr. Connors possibly contacting Oscorp or another research center such as the Life Foundation, and imagine the possibilities with that if we saw it in film. So there you have it, the top 5 unanswered questions from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. I do want to make a part 2 to this video and one for the TASM series, and I feel like it's too early to do one for the Homecoming franchise as well as the other Spider-Man franchises, so for now we'll stick with the original 2. Also, if you guys want to see a part 2 to this video, comment below the unanswered questions you guys have from the Raimi films, and I'll be more than willing to compile 5 of your guys' unanswered questions for a part 2. And as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, follow my social medias, and I will see you guys again in my next video.